Hey everyone, it's Raghu, and I'm back with Mindrolling, and I'm just looking at the cover of this book that, well, we haven't seen each other in 55 years, but what the heck? Thank God I saw this book. It's Karma and Kismet, and it's Michael Shandler, who we have a lot of intersections. It's pretty wild. Some of them you don't even know, I don't think.
I probably don't.
Yeah. Michael Shandler, welcome to Mindrolling.
Thank you, Raghu. It's great to be here.
So, just a little background on how I even met Michael was through Mirabai Bush, who's a very old friend and very close satsang sister. I was in India with her all the way back with Ram Dass, when he went back the second time, and many others that you know and hear about on these podcasts. And she said, you know what? I know this guy, and he was in Montreal when you were on that radio station, and he's the guy that, initiated this whole thing. I said, what? You're kidding. So then... of course, I had Michael's. No, I got this book somehow. I can't remember how I got it, but I started going through it, and I go, "Oh my God!" I particularly, of course, went right away to the part where, and stuff I didn't know about, like you organized Ram Dass's first tour around, I guess, Montreal, Vancouver, and so on and so forth, right?
Toronto, St. Louis, Ann Arbor.
Really?
Yeah.
So I find this all out, and then I see myself in his book going, except you spelled my name wrong, Michael.
I did? Oh my God.
Yes.
You must forgive me. Wow.
Anyhow, I knew, you said, I knew this kind of hip DJ. I was actually the program director, but yeah, I also did a show on the local FM station. It was local. That thing was a 50,000 watt station. It was got major coverage all the way even into over the border into New York near Plattsburgh. Anyhow, that is how I met Ram Dass, because Michael Shandler had somebody call and say, hey, can you just promote Ram Dass? And so whoever it went to got to me, and I said, okay, I don't know what's Ram Dass? Actually, I don't know if it was you who actually called the station, because you said Ram Dass is doing a lecture at McGill University.
Yeah.
And I went, what's Ram Dass? Who's Ram Dass? And you or somebody went, come on, Richard Alpert, Tim Leary. And I went, oh yeah, of course, I love them. And and I said, well, please do send a tape. You must have something. And the tape that you sent, this is even more crazy. This is a little bit of nostalgia, everybody out there, but I'm enjoying it, and it's fun. The tape that you had sent over was Ram Dass talk in Vancouver.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Ram Dass Here and Now or something was the name of it?
Here we all are.
Here we all are, right? Right. And that was the thing. They went, oh God, right. Like everybody who's listened to Ram Dass the first time that's in any way open to getting some idea that, look what we have been doing. We've been immersed in thinking that our minds and our thoughts and our emotions are what it's all about. And we've been in anxiety because of, what was going on in the culture. And here, okay, thank God, and then he'd share all his vulnerabilities and his bullshit. And we were like, okay, if he can do that, then, I guess I'm not the worst person in the world. He sounds pretty bad too. So that was, and then I put it on the air right away, which is why you had to, overflow there I was there, I don't remember being there twice. I think I was there just once, but I didn't remember that. Yeah. And the rest is history, as they say. I became a maniac, and and in the end, all I did was, I went down to Franklin that summer, and whose father's farm with all the hippies and the spiritual hippies or whatever we were. And we, at that point I went, I got to meet whoever it is this person is talking about. Neem Karoli Baba. I've got to get there. And he kept saying, I can't tell you who he is, his name, and I can't tell you where he is. And you don't really need to know. This being is beyond duality, so he's not bodies and all that stuff doesn't really mean much. Right. But I didn't believe any of that shit, actually. I went, please. Right. So I followed him to India, and that's my whole story from that moment to this moment, and especially in terms of what I do. And I have you to thank for it all, because you called the station. Somehow you knew me.
No, I think we can safely pin it on Ram Dass.
Actually, I'm going to safely pin it. Well, I'll tell you, I'll safely pin it on Neem Karoli Baba.
Wow.
Because one time, I mean, more literally, he said to me one day, out of the blue, he would just ask questions. That was the kind of thing. There wasn't, he would say things that's all one, subject. There's only one thing going on, stuff like that.
Right.
He said to me, what do you do? What did you do back in the West? So I'm thinking, how do I say program director of a freeform rock and roll station? That's what I did. And before I could say anything in English, which he supposedly didn't speak, he pointed at me and he went, broadcaster?
Wow.
Wow. This is what I, talk about getting my dharma all set out for me. Wow. This is what I've been doing off and on, mostly on for all those years since then.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's a great story.
Yeah, very.
Yeah. Wow.
So tell your story a little bit. Now, okay, we both have the same father. I think that your father was more intensely PTSD than mine. Mine was a bomber pilot in the Air Force, associated with the British.
Right.
And
same with my dad.
Also with the British, right? Through South
British
Africa.
8th Army, yes.
Yeah. So, just a little bit of because first of all, this book is really well written, Michael. And it's
Thank you.
I don't usually read a whole book because, I got a lot of books and blah, blah, podcasts, and it's like a thing. But this was right on. And of course, I started seeing all the different similarities that we had.
Right.
But despotic father, start there.
Right. All right. So, as you said, my dad was PTSD. He would fly off the handle at you never really knew when it was going to happen. So I spent much of especially my young childhood, kind of being very, very vigilant. And he was violent at times, so on. And everybody in the house was afraid of him. And when I was 13, I started to do badly at school. I was a good sportsman, very good athlete, but started to do badly at school. And then when I was in grade 8, I failed Latin, which in South Africa is kind of, it's the English and the Afrikaners among the white people. And if you're a part of the white cadre, then Latin is very important. And I got 19% for Latin in my first semester. So my father kind of freaked out and sent me to boarding school.
Where were you? We should say.
I was in Cape Town.
Cape Town, right. Cape Town,
very southwest of the country.
Yeah.
Second biggest city, most beautiful city. And I was sent to boarding school in a godforsaken place about 300 miles from Cape Town in an area called the Little Karoo. Very dry and dusty, desert-like place. Almost all of the people there were Afrikaners, and I couldn't, even though I was supposed to be a bilingual white South African, the truth was that I and most of my peers couldn't speak the other language. If you were English, you really, you didn't get much opportunity really, because the English and Afrikaners they hated each other, and they had a long history of warfare and so on, serious warfare. And anyway, being a Jewish kid, not being able to speak the language, I came into a situation where I was, really bullied, severely bullied. And I held my own, and I made it through the boarding school. I spent 3 years there. And it was, it was pretty traumatic. But by the third year, I was getting a little bigger and stronger, and I wasn't afraid of a fight. And so the boys began to kind of give me a bit more respect and a bit more space. Then when I turned 18, I graduated from high school, from what we called matric. And 10 days after high school, I was conscripted into the South African Army. And that was a horror show. Being Jewish, once again, being with a lot of Afrikaners who were extremely anti-Semitic and violently so, it was tough. So I won't, get into the gory details, but I'll just say that after some months in the Army, I got involved in a violent anti-Semitic incident, and I was badly beaten up and sent to hospital, and then summarily discharged from the Army, which was kind of a blessing, even though it came in a really hard way. And I have a 5-inch scar on my shoulder, which I've carried for those 57 odd years or whatever it is. So I was out of the Army, and the question was, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And South Africa has a very weird system. You're either sort of tracked into an intellectual kind of thing and you're university material, or you're not. And because I had done so poorly in high school, particularly, I definitely wasn't university material in South Africa. So the only other alternative were the trades. And because my father was in the electrical business, he said, become an electrician. So I became an electrician apprentice, and my shoulder was really badly damaged, and I just couldn't do the work. And I had an operation on my arm. And anyway, I don't think I really need to go into all the details. I'll just say that I was pretty miserable. And I want to emphasize, one thing I do want to emphasize is that I was a really straight South African, and I had a kind of, you might say, a limited bandwidth in which I operated. Like most, I wasn't all that different than most other white Jewish South Africans, but my bandwidth was definitely fairly limited. So one of the other things that had happened with me, and that I should add, is that my mother was a Holocaust survivor. She was a refugee. Her family were refugees. So I carried that kind of Jewish pain body, if you will, with me. And it was very strong. And I didn't even realize the degree and the depth of it at all. And then in 1967, so I was a Zionist. I was an idealist. I really ardently believed in Zionism, that there, because of what had happened to my mother's family. And they had been rescued, by the way, by Zionist partisans and taken to Palestine in January 1939. So Israel and my mother, I grew up with Israel as part of my mother's milk, really. My mother would say to me, never, she would wag her tail, never forget Israel, and then I would listen to her litany of stories about how she was saved and her whole family was saved, and Palestine in those days and so on. Anyway, Israel, I lived on the second largest kibbutz in Israel, which was basically a wonderful experience. It really opened me to a lot of things that I'd never been exposed to, like communal living. It was the kind of the predecessor of my what would become my hippie days, living in communes and so on. I had a really good taste of how to do it right, so to speak. And so I was living on the kibbutz, basically enjoying it, but knowing that my 6 months were coming to an end. And I was assigned a kibbutz father and mother, who were a couple who were actually only about 10 years older than me. And the guy was a high officer in the IDF, in the Israeli Defense Forces. And he took me to the Golan Heights. And I was on the battlefield. And I had a moment of real existential kind of, I guess it was a kind of awakening, where I looked around and I saw all these destroyed vehicles everywhere, guns, tanks, armored vehicles. It was just horrific. And it was the first time in my life, I think, even though I'd been in the South African Army, it was the first time in my life that the word war really it actually started to mean something. And I looked around and I said, I've been in the South African Army already. I hated it. I didn't want to be there. Now I'm in Israel. I'm still of perfect age to be conscripted, and these guys are going to conscript me for sure. And I said, do I feel that strongly about this country that, I want to go, I want to join the army here? And the answer came back, no. So I'll fast forward again. Back at the kibbutz, a tall, lanky American guy who was the basketball coach. He was a former professional basketball player. He was on the kibbutz teaching the high school kids, to play basketball. He invited me over to his little kibbutz house one day, which was a humble, basically one-room studio. And he had a bowl of brown stuff in it. I didn't really know what it was. And he started rolling this enormous, turned out to be a joint. But of course, I was naive. I had never smoked, dope or anything like that. And he was big, was fat, and he lit it, and he took a huge, enormous puff, and he passed it to me, and I said, "Oh, no, thanks, I don't smoke." So he says, "No." He says, "This isn't tobacco. This is the finest hashish from Lebanon." He says, "Don't be a fool." So I said, "Okay." So the next thing I knew, I was getting high for the first time. So that happened on the kibbutz. That was a major kind of awakening for me, you might say.
Oh, here's something before you go any further.
Yeah.
Michael, because I said I would probably throw in some things here that you don't know.
Yes.
I'm familiar because of the book. At around the same age, because it was before the 67 war, right?
Right.
I went to Israel.
Wow.
And I lived in a kibbutz.
Wow. Which
kibbutz Hazorea, which was near Haifa.
Wow.
I ended up in the Arab section of Haifa with a friend copying beautiful red Lebanese hash. I got high for the first time then as well.
I see. Okay.
And I'm reading this stuff. I'm going, wait a minute, is this a doppelganger or what? I did that, and then you end up in Montreal.
It was just, it was part of the time. Very much a part of the time.
Well, they were going to conscript. They came and said, look, there's going to be some real issues here. We need people. And, so forget about the whatever farm work you're doing. You're going to be going. I said, oh, okay. Next day, boom, gone.
You were gone.
I got on a plane. I went to Africa, East Africa.
Wow.
And I got out of Israel, yeah.
Wow. Wow. What a story. Jeez. So then the question was, for me, I don't want to stay in Israel, even though I loved Israel. I loved the spirit of it. I loved their sense of their zest for life, I guess. And I had a really great time in Israel. I think it was the first time in my life I'd ever been a little happy. I hadn't known the meaning of the word happy before that, really. But I did find some happiness in Israel. But I also knew I couldn't stay there. And I definitely couldn't go back to South Africa. South Africa was really a dark, dark place for me.
Right.
And I had significant issues with my father. As I mentioned, he and I had come to, maybe I didn't mention this, he and I had come to blows at one time. Our family had completely exploded in one big explosion. And he and I basically didn't speak to each other we were cut off from each other for 16 years.
Oh, wow.
So this is a kind of how can I say, it's part of the plot in the book. But I think it's I'll jump there right now, and I'll just tell you about that. And then we'll come back to what happened to me when I got to Vancouver. So I hadn't seen my father for 16 years. And I had just completed my doctorate, which is a whole story in and of itself about how that happened, because I was a college dropout. Anyways, and the day that I got my doctorate, I was so over the moon. I felt like some miracle had been granted to me. Me, a dropout, a terrible student in high school, manages to get into graduate school, gets recognized for some books that I was involved in, and suddenly here I am with a master's degree and then a doctorate. And I was so over the moon that I decided to call my father in South Africa. And his secretary said to me, she said, your father's in the United States on a business trip. So there was some really strange serendipity right there. So I called my dad. She gave me a number eventually. I called my dad. He was in LA. And he says, I was thinking about you and I was going to call you. And in fact, I'm coming to New York. Can we meet there? And so at that point, I had 2 kids already, was married, 2 kids, and we all went down to New York and we had a rapprochement. And at one point, I said to my dad, I said, at that point I was, freshly minted with a degree in psychology and all the rest of it. I thought I knew a lot about psychology and people. And I said to him, Dad, I'm still carrying around a heck of a lot of baggage about what happened when I was a kid. I want to talk to you about it. And he just stopped and he said, if you want to have a relationship with me, it'll have to begin today. He says, I'm not prepared to talk about the past at all. So I was like, whoa, I was in a real sort of existential moment. And I said to myself, I actually love my father, despite all the heaviness and everything that happened. I love him. And I want a relationship with him. And I said, okay, let's do it. Let's go forward from here and forget the past. And so we had 15 really great years. Now I'm going to reserve the very last part of the relationship with my father. And I hope I remember to tell you this because it's super important in terms of the cycle with him. It was, maybe I should just go ahead and say it now. We had 15 great years. One day I was back in the States. The phone rings. I was in the midst of my life trying to run a small consulting business. And my dad's on the phone and he says, can you come to South Africa? He says, I'm not well enough to come to the States, or I would come to the States. So basically I got the message that I should go, and I got on a plane and I went to South Africa. And everything seemed very normal. On the 4th day I was there, he said, I want to have lunch with you today. Pick me up at my office. He was 77, still, working away, still very copacetic, still impatient, somewhat mellower. And so I said, great. And so he gave me his old Mercedes to ride around Cape Town in. I was riding around, checking out all my old kind of stomping grounds. And around 1:00, I went to the business, and he was waiting there very impatiently for me. I think I was 2 minutes late, sort of walking around very impatiently. Gets in the car and he says, take me home. He says, I want to get my other car. I want to drive it. He had just bought a little Honda, a Honda Civic, I think it was. And he says, I love that car and I want to drive it. So I drive like 3-4 miles out of the way. We get in the new car. My dad insists on driving. And we get on the highway and he says, I want to take you to Grootskier, which is one of the old wine estates in and around Cape Town. So I'm happy to go there. And we're on the highway, and all of a sudden, and my dad is talking about Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela had become the president. He says, Nelson Mandela he's a great spokesperson for South Africa, but he's not such a great governor. He's not doing a great job governing this country. The country's really falling apart, etc. And he's giving me this whole lecture, and I'm trying to get a few words in edgeways, but this is one-way thing. And I'm happy actually to listen, because my dad really knew a lot about politics and history. So we continue. We're doing about 60 miles an hour on the highway. We come to a major kind of turn in the highway. It's called Hospital Bend. It's a downhill, and it kind of turns at the bottom and toward the southern suburbs of the city. And all of a sudden, we get to the crest of the hill, and my dad says, "I've got a terrible pain in my stomach." And I say, "Oh," and I could see he was really definitely in pain. And all of a sudden, he just says that, and then he collapsed over the wheel. The car, we're going at 60 miles an hour.
Oh, shit.
So I had to figure out something really quickly. Talk about being in the moment, effortlessly. I put my right arm underneath him and I pushed him back from the seat, and with my left, and then I grabbed the wheel. So I kind of had him leaning against my upper arm. I was holding, and then with my left hand, I pulled up. So I steered with my right hand, and with the left hand, I pulled up the handbrake. And I was able to bring the car to a halt without hitting other cars, which was in itself a miracle. Yeah. But he was gone. That was it. So that's basically the story.
Wow.
It's the final chapter in the book.
Yeah.
But anyway,
the reality,
so going back to...
Wait, before you go anywhere, I'm going to interject again. Okay. Because the way in which things came back together for you in the last 15 years, and then you had that moment of being with him when he actually left, is a huge transformation.
Yeah, no, definitely huge.
So my father also there was no physicality. It was screaming. Instead of beating, it was screaming,
right.
Which I've been told by therapists. Okay, same thing, trauma. Yeah. And I knew I did love him, and I knew he loved me, but I didn't want to have anything to do with him,
Yeah.
So I'm in India with Ram Dass and all of our other friends and so on with Maharaji. And I wrote, first of all, I got my brother to come over. I said, "You've got to get here right now." And he came overland through Afghanistan, actually.
Older or younger?
Younger, yeah. So we both, I think, wrote to our father, probably for money, most likely, but also said, "Wow, you can't believe what's happening for us here. I mean, with this incredible being." Next thing I know, we got a note. "I'll be there on such and such a date." He said, "I'm coming."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Oh my God, that would be like taking acid with him." Not something I would even think of. I had that thought, which is crazy when I tell you the rest of the story, which many of you out there have already heard this story, but it's worth telling again, especially in this context. So he came and he met Neem Karoli Baba, who, first of all, immediately told him stuff. It just broke the mind shell. This is what happened. You got on the plane here and you stopped in Germany, Frankfurt, and sat next to an Indian businessman, blah, blah. The whole thing, he just got wide-eyed. I mean, how could he possibly know this stuff? He knew he didn't tell me. Why would I care, So then suddenly, and then a bunch of other stuff that included my mother. They were divorced not long before. He turns to me and he goes, "Neem Karoli Baba, did you give your father the medicine?" I said, "Yeah."
You give your father what?
Medicine. The medicine. I said, "Yes, he had a cold. I gave him some aspirin." Of course. He said, "Nice yogi medicine that Ram Dass gave me." This is all through translator, right?
Right.
And I went, "Acid?" And my father, "LSD?" Like, what? And then Maharaji looks at me and goes, "Take care of your father while he's here in India, and meet me in 10 days in Allahabad, another city."
Right.
Off we went to Benares, which, the place where people have gone to die on the banks of the Ganges for thousands of years. And I met somebody that I knew as part of the satsang. "Do you happen to have a hit of acid?" "Yeah, I got one left." I said, "I'll take it." And I did, and he took it.
Wow.
50-odd-year-old.
Was he open to it, or did you have to sort of pull his arm a bit?
No, somehow he was. I couldn't understand. I guess he was blown away by Maharaji. So if he said,
Yeah.
so he felt maybe there was some way in which he wasn't going to die or something. You know,
Right.
first of all, he didn't think he was afraid of dying. That was one of his big
Right.
PTSD shells. But he did take it. He had a death trip in Benares with animals that are dead. We were right by where they burned the biggest Manakarnika, the big yacht. And then somebody had died and was lying there, and people were just putting, whatever money, because if they didn't have, enough wood, it didn't all burn. And then the dolphins would eat it, and the dogs and the cows. And anyhow, this is India. So he did, and he had this death trip. We went back to see Maharaji, who never said a word about the trip or anything, didn't ask him nothing. And he told him a bunch of other stuff that nobody could know, particularly about a horse that he had saved from euthanization, from being euthanized, by going out there every 2 hours all night, putting medication and so on.
Right.
Anyhow, that was it for my father. He fell on the floor. And, then he left, and then, I don't know, half a year later, I came back home, and he then went back a few months later. If you can think of it, today I wouldn't go twice within 10 months. I wouldn't do it, to India, even with what we've got now, and what we had then was like not so good.
Right.
Anyhow, he did. He went back, and he almost lost all his businesses. He was in the ad agency and so marketing and so on. And anyhow, bottom line is, Michael, we had a relationship for the rest of our lives from that time onward.
Fabulous. What a great story.
What a parallel story.
Yeah.
Right? In a way, my father needed the dynamite. So that's
Well, my father could have used it too, except I think he was too. I think he would have completely freaked out. I don't think he had. Anyway, who knows?
Yeah, you never know.
It didn't happen, and it probably wouldn't have happened. I don't think he was as open as your dad was.
Yeah. Well. Anyhow, another piece of the pie. So to speak. Now I'm jumping forward a little bit because it was of great interest to me. So Michael spent a lot of time with Haridas Baba, who was Ram Dass's teacher, yoga. And I don't mean just asanas, I mean the whole spectrum, the Eightfold Path, whatever. And I never met him, Michael. I only only met him through, knowing of him because of the having access to the book before it came out, and maybe that, or just hearing. Well, he used to just tell us all. We used to sit up in the Himalayas, and he would recount all these stories.
So many people know the story of Baba Haridas, teaching Ram Dass about Ashtanga yoga, 8-limbed yoga, which Ram Dass talked about in his, a lot in the early days, particularly, I think. And it was a wonderful framework for Ram Dass to kind of introduce the rest of us to Eastern thought in general. It was a good little framework.
Yeah.
But Haridas, my friend and I, let me put it this way. I wrote to Ram Dass. Someone gave me a tape. I guess it was the same tape that we sent to you.
Which you made into a record, right? You made that into
I did. I did.
A vinyl, did you?
A vinyl.
Yeah. I want a copy of that. You must have a few left.
I don't,
Oh, my God.
I don't.
That would have been a real...
I saw that it's online. It's online. It's the exact talk is online. It's called Here We All Are.
The talk we have, and we share that with people.
Yeah.
But the actual vinyl is what I want to see.
And I have to take a look and see if maybe there's one set that I somehow kept. But anyway, yeah. So, Ram Dass, completely impressed me. I mean, even before I met him, just listening to that tape, I must have listened to that tape. I mean, I don't want to exaggerate, but 50 times, I'm sure of it. I absolutely drank every single word in. I knew the whole tape off by heart. And finally, when I got to Montreal, having lived at Swami Vishnu Devananda's ashram, I plucked up my courage and I decided to write to him, care of his dad in Franklin, New Hampshire. And lo and behold, a letter comes back in a couple of weeks. And Ram Dass said, yeah, he'll be happy to do a talk in Montreal. Would I set it up? And he sent two photographs. One was of Maharaji and the other was of Haridas. These little black and white, sort of very indistinct pictures. And Jerry and I said, hey, this is an amazing opportunity. Let's do an acid trip with these two photos.
Really?
So that's exactly what happened. We had some, I think it was some sunshine LSD. It was good LSD, and we took it, and we put the two photos up on the wall, and we stood in front of them, and soon the acid started to come on, and we looked at the photos, and they suddenly had, both of them had turned to these living beings, and we were freaked out. We jumped back. Maharaji looked like an old man in a blanket, and Haridas was sitting there looking like the sort of the stereotype of a yogi with with his long hair on top of his head, looking very emaciated but elegant. So, and he was the teacher. So I, for one, and my friend too, were both attracted to him because we were looking for a teacher, somebody that could teach us how to do this.
Yeah.
So Ram Dass came to Montreal, and we've told the story about, going over to the radio station. That evening, I think, I'm guessing, I'm going to say 1,500 people showed up and absolutely packed that auditorium to the rafters. And the fire marshal said, no more people. So Ram Dass turned to me and he said, hey, you're really good at this. See if you can get this hall for tomorrow night. So I did that.
Oh, so good.
And again, the place was packed to the rafters, thanks to your broadcasting it to many thousands of people.
Weird. Oh my God.
And so Ram Dass looks at me and he says, you're really good at setting this. And he said, how would you like to be my road manager? And I said, wow, if Ram Dass, wants me to do that for him, absolutely, I'll do it. I knew my dharma had been handed to me.
Yeah. Right.
So I went off and I set up these talks for him, and none of them were as successful as the two in Montreal.
That's because of CKGM.
So happened. I suspect it was because of the radio station.
Yeah.
I do.
Well, once I heard the talk, then I went a little bit nutsy, and that's all I was doing all day. So you got to hear Ram Dass. I was a whole
right.
fraud.
Yeah,
that's so great.
So I tried to. So we had these great talks in Montreal, and Ram Dass turns to my buddy Jerry and he says, "How would you like to go to India to study with Haridas?" And my friend was like, whoa, this is amazing. India, wow, that's so cool. So Ram Dass sort of blessed him for India and me. He says, you're really good at this, set up these talks for me. So I felt kind of put down and a little bit like, how come he's not sending me to India? Am I not pure enough? Anyways, I found out during that period that my friend was I think it was in Nainital, working with Haridas, that maybe I could write a letter to Haridas and that my friend would pass it to him. So I wrote him a letter and I said, I live in Canada and I'm really into yoga and meditation and my life's changed and blah, blah, blah. And he writes back to me and he says, as a matter of fact, I'm coming to live in California and meet me in California in a month.
Oh.
So I went down with two friends down to near Davis, California, on the ocean down there. And we were shown into the room, and Haridas was sitting on a big bed, his hair piled up on top of his head. Quite a diminutive character, small, and quite skinny, especially in those days, very skinny. And so that was the beginning of the first meeting. And during the meeting, he said to me, at one point, how many times have you taken LSD? So who really could say how many times I'd taken, I didn't really remember. And I said, I can't really remember, Babaji. So he said, the first trip you took was the important one. Everything else was a waste of time after that, basically. So this didn't sit too well with me, because I was sort of the Ramdas school. Ramdas had said that Haridas had said that LSD was like a Christ in America, awakening the youth. And I said, yeah, that sounds right to me. That's my experience. So here he was in the here and now saying, your first trip was the only one. You learned everything you needed from that first trip. So he said, your mind's out of control, he said to me. And he said, your nervous system is basically shot. So he said, but there are yogic techniques that if you practice them can help to heal your nervous system. And there are Ayurvedic herbs that also can help. So he showed me some breathing exercises, and he said, practice these every day. And he wrote down some names of some herbs for me to take. And 4 or 5 hours sitting on his bed went just like that. It was really magical. And my friends, also similarly were very, very, we all were floating when we left there. So then I went to Vancouver and back to Vancouver. And a buddy of mine had gone to New York, and he called me from New York, and he says, you got to come to New York. And he says, Oski Chazo is this Bolivian guru. And he's the ideal guru for Westerners. He knows he's a Westerner himself, and he's enlightened, and he's got this great training, and you should come to New York. So, and he said, as a matter of fact, there's a car that needs driving from Vancouver to New York. So I thought, like, whoa, this is definitely a sign. So I was already married at that point. Nina and I got in the car, or Parna, as she was called in those days, got in the car. We drove to New York. And I won't go through all of the adventures of Eureka, and there were several.
I knew of it quite well.
You know Eureka quite well, okay?
Not that way. I mean, I know you really went in and took these days-long thing. All I can say about it, okay, without being too critical, was I was glad in many instances, because there was many of these kinds of things that were being presented in the West, that thank you, Ramdas, straight to the source, stay there, and all we know, I mean, this is something, you know who Krishnadas is, I think?
Of course.
Yeah. And we were just actually talking the other day about what we know, what we were handed from Neem Karoli Baba. And there's only one thing. He terms it puris and potatoes. When we got to that ashram and first met him, it was all through that. That represents love. When we got there, that's all that happened. Okay, right. We were fed enormous amounts of puris, are like fried chapatis, and really greasy potatoes. I mean, it was so tasty. We'd sit there, we'd get sick and everything. It was nuts. But that's what we know. And in other words, we never came across anything that pulled us in any way. And so I feel very fortunate. The truth is, though...
I think you were.
Yeah, no, we were. But the truth is that somehow we were steered into Tibetan Buddhist practices. Mm-hmm. So that part of, okay, like you're saying, Haridas could teach all sorts of amazing things, the Eightfold Path. And these beings also I mean, of course, we learned Vipassana with Sharon Salzberg and Joseph and Jack and all that.
Right.
We were all there doing that. And then, so we did get something that allowed us to engage in a way that might be productive to transform this ridiculous thing that we believe was real.
Right.
Yes. And
yes.
I mean, it's just amazing when you think. Actually, it's in the book. I wanted to read something that really is what most people, I think, encounter at some point. That makes all the sense in the world. Who's this from? Huxley, right?
Huxley,
a really good friend of Ram Dass's.
Right.
I'm going to read it. To be shaken out of the ruts of ordinary perception.
Yes.
To be shown for a few timeless hours the outer and the inner world, not as they appear to an animal obsessed with survival, or a human being obsessed with words and notions. I love, how he puts all this.
That too. Yeah.
But as they are apprehended directly and unconditionally by mind at large. I don't remember this from the book, that this is an experience of inestimable value to everyone.
Yes,
you get with mind at large. I mean, somehow I gotta figure something out. I wonder if Ram Dass ever addressed that. But yeah, I mean, this is what happens for everyone. And once that happens, then the rest of this karma, gets spun off. That's what I was going to say. Maharaji said to us once, "I've done everything for you. I leave you the mind." And that's where it makes sense that you can have a teacher like Haridas to deal with all that kind of stuff. I mean, he had so much knowledge. I mean, and like you said, he handed that to Ram Dass, and through Ram Dass in the initial days, like from 68, 69, and half of 70. Yeah. That was just important stuff. And then, of course, through Be Here Now with all of, the recipes in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also an amazing thing. And by the way, you want to hear something even more interesting? Not more interesting, not at all. Salt Springs.
Yes.
Right?
Salt Spring Yoga Center?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a group of Ram Dass's caretakers that are living in that area, and they're flying in, and they're doing retreats. They're actually doing a retreat there next week, I believe, because it's happening when we're doing a retreat in Boone. Kind of weird, but
it's a nice island.
So they went there, and one of them, a friend from California, went, and then he came back, and he said, "I've got something from Haridas's people." I go, "Really?" He said, "Yeah. They donated. They had all of the letters, Ram Dass to Haridas.
Wow.
And they donated it to the library, because we're in the midst of creating a library. I mean,
Oh, that's great.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah. Once they get somewhere, I'll share them with you.
Yeah,
I
I'd love
think you
to
would
see
enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have my letters anymore, but he wrote. I probably had a correspondence with him I did have a correspondence with him for 10 years, which really followed these. I wish I had kept them more
You
scrupulously.
should have kept those. Oh God.
Yeah. But I have some of them. I do have some of them, but they followed the arc of my, many of the changes that I was going through, just as a person, as a seeker, as a spiritual seeker. And he was very, very helpful. But he was also, a tough taskmaster type. He was very, very much into discipline kind of thing. Mm-hmm. He loved to play also, to be fair, but he was very strong on the sadhana. Sadhana to him was the most important thing. And he often said that, in fact, the most important thing is sadhana. And he was uncompromising about that.
Yeah, that's another, thank God that wasn't a path that we at that time could take at all. Although we did these major meditation courses.
You did.
But hanging out with Maharaji had nothing to do with practice whatsoever.
Right.
I mean, we'd learn how to do the Hanuman Chalisa so we could spend more time with him. We didn't care what it was. I mean, I'm being dramatic. That's not quite true. But it was that. And loosey goosey, hang out, eat, love, eat, pray, love.
Right.
God, you bring back so much, Michael. Thank you.
So then, anyways, just to sort of see if I can get complete somehow with the story.
Yes.
I spent 5 years as he's kind of one of his right-hand people in Vancouver. And we got that community going, including the yoga center on Salt Spring. We started a publishing arm, and it was quite a happening thing around roughly 1972, 73, 74, 75, 76. And then we left there in 78 and came east.
Right.
So that kind of, then I did see Haridas after that. He came to visit me in Amherst I think, his Ma Renu, the woman who took care of him, the professor from UC, told me that he had come to see us and, in fact, stay with us to honor us for the work that we had done in Vancouver. So that felt like a very nice completion.
That's so great.
So, but then that was the end of Haridas in a way. I didn't see him. I went to see him at Mount Madonna a few times, but it kind of petered out, and I was looking for something else, and I started getting more into more of a Buddhist direction, although not mindfulness, but more sort of non-dual. I became very interested in non-dual stuff, and I got into a guy by the name of Peter Fenner. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No.
He's a Tibetan Buddhist monk and non-dual. So I learned a lot of stuff about it, about non-dual, the kind of meditation he was doing, which was basically very different than anything I had done before. I had been trained with Haridas in a lot of sort of what you might call one-pointed focus type meditations, where you're developing very, very strong concentration. The meditations with Fenner and with others in the same sort of genre was basically, and I suppose Adyashanti at that time was in there too, were basically learning to allow everything to be as it is.
Dzogchen.
It is Dzogchen kind of approach. Everything's included. And learning to sit with your attractions and aversions, and so that's kind of what happened to my my spiritual path.
Yeah. Hey, this book is so great. It's a great story, Michael. I mean, obviously, as we've been talking, I have so many common intersections here in this story. It's pretty amazing, I mean, and not to mention the fact that you did write to him, and he said, "Oh, yeah, okay, I'll come to Montreal."
Yeah,
I mean, I have people in Montreal, many people, who heard what, I kept putting up talks and stuff and talking about him and so on, that ended up with Maharaji in India, and they said, "Yeah, well, we owe you one on that one." Well,
cool.
I owe you
That's
one.
Great.
Okay, Michael. Oh, so
That's
great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody, there'll be... Michael, you will send over links so people can check out the book and purchase and so on.
Sure. I'll send you the link.
Yeah,
and
send me the link, and I'll get the producer
Good.
to get it
Here's
in.
what it looks like.
Yeah, show the picture. Karma and Kismet. Yeah, no, a nice cover, nice design and everything. And now you have grown children too, right?
I do. My oldest daughter's in her 50s. The younger one is in her mid-40s. So, and I have 5 grandchildren at this point.
Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Gesei gesund, as they
Yeah,
say.
it's excellent indeed. Indeed.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Raghu. It's been really terrific. Many,
Yeah.
many thanks. Yeah.
Everybody, you
Namaste.
can go to Mindrolling at BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling, and you can also catch people like Joseph Goldstein, who comes to mind, and we have many people, including obviously
Absolutely.
Ramdas,
I know
Alan
Joseph.
Watts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
I
lives
mean,
near here.
yeah, no, I know. He lives right
Yeah.
by you.
Yeah.
And Sharon and so on.
Yep.
So check it out, and we will see you next week. Ram Ram.
Ciao.